Alright, today we're going to have a quick look at why pretty much almost all of the Catholic Church in the United States, in America, is all Novus Ordo and run by homosexual bishops and predatory homosexuals at that, for the most part. I have to give credit where credit is due, and most of this information comes from Ann Barnhardt's site. Given that in the last video I quite specifically called her out, it's also only right that I give credit to the fact that she's done a lot of really excellent work for the Catholic Church, and I do believe that she is a believer of the Catholic Church. So you know, it's okay to criticize people who are leading others into error, but we should also give her dues. And this has to do with why almost all the Catholic Church in the USA is actually Novus Ordo and not Catholic Church at all. And it has to do with a guy that's called, I think his first, Joseph Bernardin. It's really amazing, you know. Names always have a story behind them. I've noticed this since I was a kid. There is a very definite percentage of people whose surname invariably describes something quite appropriate about them. My own name, of course, comes from the word love, and you can tell that the milk of human kindness flows through my veins. So Joseph Bernardin. Now, it's just funny to me because of a slang term, a very rude slang term in the dialect of the place where I was born, in Turin. And those of you that speak Italian slang will know what Bernarda stands for. And Bernardin, Joseph Bernardin, you know, first name Joseph is shared with myself, which I believe comes from the Hebrew, which I believe means something along the lines of God adds. And in his case, given that Bernarda is a slang name for the female sex organ, Joseph adds cunt. And this guy pretty much was one, although I'm pretty sure he never touched one. Joseph Bernardin was born in America, in South Carolina, in 1928. Now, I'm not going to go through all the details. If you're interested in this, go to Ann Barnhardt's site, which is barnhardt.biz, and there's a search function in there. Just type in Bernardin, Joseph Bernardin, and you'll get all the details. But this guy was born in 1928, and he was a homosexual linked to the gay underground scene of where he lived, which I think was Colombia, and he was recruited by Satanists. Now, this is in 1948, all right? Satanists and communists, which often were both, were, you know, they sort of cultivated gays and gay bars. And there's a very interesting statistic that came out on a recent article. I can't remember where I read it, but it was by a comment made by the leader of the Satanic Temple in the United States that said that more than half their members are members of the LGBTQ pedo community. And this makes perfect sense. You know, if you are aware of the realities of the gay lifestyle and of the gay so-called community, you know that it's vicious, and it has no parallel to heterosexual unions or love or that sort of thing. It's quite a different setup, and it makes perfect sense that, you know, the majority of so-called actual official Satanists are actually you know, gay, lesbian, transgender, whatever. So, and that's, you know, that's just a fact. That's not an arguable theory or an opinion. That is a statement of fact based on the membership of the order of Satanists. So, now this guy was, you know, openly, well, gay and a deviant and all sorts, and he was promised power and as much deviant sex as he could master if he would enter the seminary and be ordained as a Catholic priest. And that's exactly what he did. He went, after his first year at USC, he went home and announced that he was going to join a seminary, and his family was utterly stunned. He was ordained in 1952. So this guy was born in 1928. He was ordained in 1952 by a bishop called John J. Russell, who was also fingered in depositions as the celebrant of satanic rituals. In other words, he was also deeply involved, and he was already infiltrated the church to this point. Now, this Bernardin guy was then subsequently made a bishop at the stunningly young age of 37. So he was also then shockingly, and I quote Ann Barnhardt here, he was made the General Secretary of the Conference of Catholic Bishops in 1968. This is just a couple of years after Vatican II, after being a bishop only 2 years. So he was ordained as a bishop immediately after Vatican II, and then he was made, very shortly thereafter, the General Secretary of the Conference of Catholic Bishops. And he was only 40 years old at this time. And guess what was his new job? And again, I quote Ann Barnhardt, implementing the Novus Ordo Mass. And we can now say with certainty, destroying the Tridentine Mass, and with it, the Church itself. This is why I'm wondering why Ann Barnhardt is still arguing against the sedeprivationist point of view, which is clearly correct. Now, only a few years later, in 1974, at the age of 46, Bernardin was elected the president of the Conference of Catholic Bishops of the U.S., which is now called the USCCB. And he held that post either himself or through his handpicked proxies, and pretty much controlled what went on in the U.S., most especially, and this is pivotal, who was elevated to the office of bishop in the U.S. and who ran seminaries until he died in 1996. So we now have a period where essentially from 1966 till 1996, so 30 years immediately after Vatican II, where pretty much every bishop that was made a bishop in the United States was made a bishop only on the say-so of this openly, Marxist, openly homosexual, completely predatory Satanist and destructor of the church. Pardon me. He told people that they had to vote for pro-abort politicians and blah blah blah. So he had a huge influence, and at Ann's side there's a lot of links between Bernardin, Saul Alinsky, and Obama, and these are again, really quite clear links. Quite, it's not some weird off the side conspiracy theory. It's all pretty obvious stuff once you know it. But that's why the situation of the Catholic Church, particularly in the United States, is such a mess. Now, I say particularly, but, look at the Vatican. The Vatican is now a bathhouse of predatory homosexuals, pedophiles. It's a joke. So, the effort to destroy the Catholic Church has been very successful in large part. But it will never be totally successful, because we are promised that the Catholic Church will exist right until the end of days, and that is a fact. There is a remnant of the Church left. We are it. I hope you are it, and I hope that you will continue to join me in expanding it. That's why I'm quite sort of precise with this sort of stuff, and why I keep hammering the same nail on the same head. All right. So that's that. Joseph Bernardin is why most bishops in the United States are gay and Satanists, and obviously also not actually bishops of the Catholic Church. They are probably some kind of cleric in the satanic church to which they belong, the Novus Ordo. And that's that. Now, I wanted to talk about something completely different as well, which is this, the Iliad. If you've not read the Iliad, you should. It is brilliant. It is one of the oldest stories in recorded human history, and it is amazing. Now, personally, in order to read the Iliad, and it's a book you can read again and again, I need sort of like a month off on a beach somewhere, because it's the sort of book that definitely makes you sort of see what's happening. And yes, it's considered legend, but it's also history, obviously. Otherwise, the city of Troy, or Ilium, as it's properly named, would have not been found by the German guy, amateur archaeologist, who actually found it. And the amazing thing about Ilium, or Troy, is that it really is as described in the Iliad. I've been there, and including the passage that Odysseus used to get into the city and steal the statuette of the goddess to defeat the Trojans. The reason that the horse apparently got in there was because the statue of their goddess was taken by Odysseus. And that passage exists. And it's not even mentioned in the visitor center or so on. It's so weird to me that I went scouting around and I found it. And it's like, oh, and it's there. It's locked. There's like a gate in front of it, so I couldn't get inside it, which was just as well, because there were literally clouds of mosquitoes in there, because you could see the water. There was water going in. It's some kind of underground stream, from which the city could get fresh water, which is why, the siege lasted 10 years, and yet the people didn't run out of water. And if you've read the Iliad, there is another brilliant book which is just as good as the Iliad, I would say, and it's this: the Lost Books of the Odyssey. Now, the Odyssey, of course, is not the Iliad, it's the follow-on. So if you've read the Iliad, you should probably also read the Odyssey. But if you've read both those books, the Iliad and the Odyssey, this book is an amazing piece of work, because there are 50, if from memory, something like 50 different, 44, okay, 44 different versions of the Odyssey in one tiny book. I mean, some of these versions of the Odyssey are just like a paragraph long, but the amazing ability of this writer, his name is Simon Armitage. There you go, just in case you can't see it properly there. Simon Armitage, and that's his book, The Lost Books of the Odyssey. It is a spellbinding book, as the actual cover says. It really is. It's astonishing. I wish I could write like this guy, because in one sentence he paints a picture that is so rich and has such depth and has such a sensation behind it that just drives into your bones. It's an amazing book. And how somebody could get something as complex and as deep and as mystical as the Odyssey and reduce it to a page sometimes, and it still makes sense, and it's just as good. So yeah, if you want a really sort of out of this world type of experience with a book, I suggest read the Iliad, read the Odyssey, and then read this book. That should keep you busy for a while. Okay, that's basically it. I'm going to keep this one short. Hopefully I'll remember to switch on the mic and do all the other bits. I know that the last one was a bit low. That's because it's not because I forgot to do anything, but it's because once I record, I then have to put it through a filter to like get the audio to be a bit louder and cleaner and so on, and that takes time, and I don't always have the time. So that's why I'm keeping this one short as well. All right, have a good day.